I'd like to talk to you about the four voices. What do I mean? Well, a few years ago, I met this amazing man, Rabbi Lawrence Troster, um, and he talked. We were talking about our insights about the Bible and ecology, and he told me about the four biblical voices on our relationship to creation. And I just thought it was so inspiring. I wanted to share them with you. Um, he said that the Bible, since it was written on a very long period of time, and God inspired different hands to write, um, well, then there were different takes on how to talk about human beings, their role in creation. And he came down to these four categories, these four different voices. Human beings are caretaker on this planet, like a farmer. A human is a citizen of a larger, wider community of living beings. And finally, is also simply, basically, a creature. Now, Rabbi Troster, as his name, well, he's from the Jewish tradition. And so obviously the examples he gives usually come from the Hebrew Bible, so the Old Testament. But what I did, I add a little star there and put one example from the New Testament each time. So let's explore this one, the caretaker. So he suggested Genesis 1, humans are clearly put on this planet to to have dominion over the creatures, have dominion over the earth, and submit the creatures. So, clearly a superior position compared to other creatures. Psalm 8 says that humans are just slightly lower than gods. Psalm 23 talks about the Good Shepherd as an example how we should be shepherds as well. In John 10, same thing, Jesus talks about being the Good Shepherd. So again, presents the shepherds as being a good example of how we should be acting. All of these place human beings much superior to the rest of creation. And that's one of the voices, and we can see with our knowledge, with our technology, with our capacities, that it's true. Existentially, we do have superior capacities. But here's what's interesting, because this is not the only voice. Let's go see three other voices. Human beings are like farmers. This is seen as Genesis 2, where after creating the human being, God says, you shall till it and keep it. So tilling, cultivating. And then in chapter 4, Adam and Eve are expelled from paradise, expelled from the Garden of Eden. And from then on, they have to cultivate the soil. And that's going to be hard, much harder than how they had to work in the garden before. So they're farmers. Leviticus, I put Leviticus 25, I could put other references as well, and Deuteronomy 2 talks a lot about, all these Jewish laws of how to manage as a farmer, basically, agriculture in the Near East. Then in the New Testament, just gave two examples here. Luke 13, you get the fig tree, the parable of the fig tree, where the master says, let's cut it down. The fig tree hasn't been producing. And the servant says, no, let me put some more manure, some more fertilizer, and it'll help. And we'll decide next year if we have to cut it. So really in a farmer's position. And in Mark 4, the parable of the sower, So really this responsibility of, if we want the earth to be more fruitful, we just throw all these seeds and it'll grow. Here's the human being presented as a citizen of the world, citizen of a wider community, of all living things, of all creatures. Psalm 148, we have the psalmist there singing and inviting other creatures to sing, recognizing that they each have their song. They each have their pitch and their way to contribute to this praise of God. Isaiah 11 is seeing what the world will look like eventually. A world where there's no violence, no predation, no predators, and finally we can feel this community of living beings together. Romans 8 talks about the creation that groans like in labor pain. So we have all these creatures suffering together. There's this sense of community. And finally, Matthew 6. People are troubled. They come to Jesus. They're troubled for so many things. And he says, well, look at the birds. They don't sow, they don't reap, but God gives them everything they need. Look at the lilies in the field. So what is Jesus doing? He's saying, look, you're part of a wider community of living beings that all bathe in the providence of God. And let's go to the fourth voice. Human beings are creatures. Very simple creatures, equal to the other ones. Here's why. Job chapters 38, 39, 40, 41, it goes on and on. God tells Job that, look at the eagles and look at the horses and look at all these different animals that have some capacities that are much greater than yours, humans. And we get a huge sense of humility by reading all of that. And that God has a personal relationship to all of the creatures and doesn't have to go through human beings as being superior to the others. It's just this direct relationship to them. And we just realize that, wow, creation is just amazing. And yeah, we are one creature among others. In Ecclesiastes chapter 3, it goes even further, saying that the breath from animals and the breath from humans is the same breath. That, I'll say it in modern terms, if we cut off the oxygen, we die. And in Ecclesiastes it's written that, well, the superiority of humans over animals is just vanity. It's not true. There's no superiority. So that's very humbling. The New Testament isn't as explicit on this, yet Jesus is always teaching about humility in so many different ways. And in Luke 9, Jesus invites people to bear their cross and follow Jesus. What does that mean? Well, one of the things it means is that Jesus on the cross is suffering physically. And we all have little boo-boos. We all have little things, and some people have really big things to bear, physically suffering. Even though modern medicine is amazing to alleviate some of the pain or make us better, some people have it pretty tough. And so Jesus says, bear that cross, bear that suffering, and follow me. So it's really recognizing that we're creatures and that, we have a certain amount of suffering and we have to continue. There's a passage in the first letter to the Corinthians, the end of the letter, chapter 29, where there's this recommendation to present ourselves as creatures in front of our Creator. Okay? So it's this movement of humility. It's not easy to get closer to God when we consider ourselves gods ourselves. When we think we're just so superior and we're just so good and this and that. As we say, rare are the people who converted the day they won the lottery. But when we are suffering, when we're going through a tough time, there's a sense of, well, finally, I'm just a creature and I need to present myself in front of my Creator. So that's one of the ways of doing it. I want to thank Rabbi Troster, who passed away a few years ago. But for teaching me these 4 voices, because it really made my reading of the Bible very different. And I think the Bible says truth because we are all of these things. And it's true that we're caretakers, we're superior, and we're also farmers, so we have to work at the sweat of our brow to help the earth produce much more fruit. And we are part of a wider living community, and finally we are just creatures. We're all of these. Here's a last word on this. This is my personal analysis of these that he found. 2 Greek words, anthropos and bios. Anthropos, human beings, humans, and bios, life. So when we talk about anthropocentrism, it's the human being that's at the center, and other things gravitate around it. What's important is the human being. Biocentrism, life is what's important, and other things might gravitate around. But life is important, so life is on the same plane. But anthropocentrism, the human being is first, and then the other things are secondary. So we see that humans as caretakers, as having dominion over creation, well, that's a strong anthropocentrism. But the farmer has to work hard. So that's a moderate anthropocentrism, because the farmer has to work with the land. Okay? Humans as citizen of the world, well, that's moderate biocentrism, because not all living things are at the same level. Some are more important than others. As citizens, we might all cast our vote as equals, but the way society works, there are people that have more responsibilities than others. Some have are decision makers, and some others don't. And finally, if we recognize humans as creatures, well, then it's a strong biocentrism, because all of life is on the same plane. Just like I said, put a cricket in a jar, close the jar, or cut the oxygen for a human being, and unfortunately the same thing happens. We die. So we have the same breath, and we have the same needs. We need to drink, we need to eat, we need shelter. If we don't have these things, we can't live very long, just like any other creature. This was so enlightening to me. Thank you, Rabbi Troster, and I hope it's enlightening for you as well.